All right. Well, thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks, Quick Change, for helping put this all together. He's been doing these tech talks. This is the third one. So thanks everybody for coming. Airfoil, Quick Change, everyone, Ed Z. Okay, so this episode is going to be about DAOs. So this is kind of a little fireside chat. Quick Change has put together a whole slew of information, and we're just going to kind of go over like what DAOs are, what they mean specifically to Sarcophagus and the community, and just kind of everything as a whole. So how does a DAO work and how can it be used? So DAO is generally like it's the overall structure of the community, if you will. A decentralized autonomous organization. It's a term used to describe an organization controlled by a like voting mechanism or something like that, and the rights to and control of that mechanism is decentralized, as in there's no central entity controlling it, and there's no how do you put it, there is a natural selection mechanism for the nodes and operators of the network. Like they're not chosen by a central entity either, in like the form of a distributed network where it's similar to a decentralized network, but it is chosen nodes by a central entity, and then it can become more decentralized from there. But anyway, I'm getting into a rabbit hole. And Sarcophagus is a DAO in the way that we have a central voting mechanism that operates autonomously on the will of the entire community. So it takes everyone's input that has put voting rights into the DAO to operate the DAO. There is a minimum threshold for votes. So like so many people have to have their input on voting. And that's actually going to be something that gets expanded on and incentivized and whatnot in the future, because we really want people, everyone who has a Sarco token in their hand, to want to vote and be a part of that. If one person gets to make the decision, then one person can do something malicious to affect the whole project. A DAO works against that. No one person owns the project. The decision is made by the users. The initial way to solidify this was to give the DAO the majority of the tokens. It's because the governance that the DAO is used for. So the DAO, when Sarcophagus itself was created, of course, there's an initial source of tokens, and to decentralize that in the interest of everyone, the tokens that weren't held by anyone were put in the DAO, which at the time was some like 82% of the supply went into the DAO itself. That way, only voters and basically the whole community got a choice as to who got the rest of them, if you will, whether they went into incentives or maybe a centralized exchange makes a proposal or just anything. Everybody gets a choice in that in some form. 80%, sorry, not 82%. And yeah, that lets everyone decide on how to use the tokens, liquidity farming, vesting, sexes, L2s, developer proposals, community proposals. There was a developer proposal recently by Decent, actually, because they're some of the main developers of Sarcophagus, and they put up a proposal for funding for their lab to do a lot of the V2 development that they've got ongoing right now. That was a few months ago now, that proposal was put up and passed. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Maybe I should drop a link for that so people can look at that in the interest of understanding the process. And then going further into the DAO ecosystem, for the idea of efficiency, DAOs work at a very like high level. Like everyone gets a say, but there is a cost to that, and the general cost associated, at least with like the Ethereum network, is gas. You know, any EVM network, you have gas costs associated with your voting rights. And with ETH, sometimes it can be really expensive or really time consuming to bring everyone together across an entire network for smaller votes. Like you can have smaller subsects. And so that's why there was a system created of subDAOs, where we take a Genosis multi-sig vault, assign signers to it, usually at least half a dozen signers to it. It depends on what the purpose is specifically. Like I'm in my head right now thinking of the liquidity subDAO that is looking to be formed soon. And you take those signers, and those signers are chosen by the community. And they're typically leadership. So everybody like knows who they are and at least has some form of trust there. Because with a subDAO, there does actually have to be some trust because the DAO will execute it all. Like the DAO will give that trust, and everyone has to vote together on whether they like trust this subDAO. So that is the one little difference between like a subDAO and the primary DAO itself is the DAO itself is completely trustless. Everyone has 100% control over that together versus the subDAO. You are dissecting a small amount of that control and giving it to this multi-sig vault so that it can execute things more efficiently. So like in the instance of the liquidity subDAO we're looking at right now, it would be faster and more efficient for executing the liquidity deposits into the LP. And like, if you look at it logistically, if you try to do that from a DAO, it would be a lot of executions and it would be really expensive because you're not just, moving tokens from one address to another. We're talking about moving multiple tokens, contract interactions, swaps and such. And those things can be kind of expensive. And when you're doing it from a DAO and asking everyone to be a part of that process, the gas can get kind of exponential. So looking at just trying to make it more efficient and making people more willing, I guess, to be a part of it so it's not so expensive, we created the subDAO system. So, and I don't know if anybody has any questions on the subDAO system. I know it can get kind of deep, like it just kind of keeps going.
Yeah, I think, Jonny, everything you said was great, right? But, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. So I was thinking, let's kind of go into it, right? You already covered, what a DAO was, right? A big thing on the DAO is, what does it actually do? What's the whole point of it, right? The whole point of it can be, there's mention of things being distributed, but that's not quite a DAO. So, going back to the beginning, what a DAO is, right? No one has authority over it. And as Jonny mentioned, right, when that happens, no one can say this is what's going to happen to the DAO. This is what the DAO is going to do. It's asking everyone who's a part of the ecosystem, right, to take part in it and determine what's actually going to happen. If it was one person, there'd be no reason for a DAO, right? So no one has authority over it. It's a group that makes the decision. As Jonny mentioned again before, there is a built-in treasury, right? Instead of, why would anyone listen to the DAO, right? Well, the way to listen to the DAO is, give the DAO some power, right? In this case, give it the treasury, right? In the case of Sarcophagus said, okay, here's 80% of the tokens that were created, that were generated at the initial creation of the DAO, right? That's another thing. How are the decisions made? Again, no one person makes that decision. It is by the group, and you have to put a proposal. You can't make a decision behind the scenes. It can't go through. It technically cannot go through. No one has to listen to it, abide by it, because it's not baked into what the actual organization does, right? So in this case, right, let's say there is a V2. Well, the V2 doesn't ever happen if no one says, okay, we want to let it happen, right? We want to make an improvement. And just like we said, no one's in charge of it. That continues to go. There's no CEO, right? Outside of that, what I mentioned before, right? The proposals go out. Everything's out in the open, right? It is out in the open. It is in the code. You can see everything. You can see the finances. You can see the code. You can see, in this case, in the case of Sarcophagus, you can see the code. It's open. Typically, the reason for a DAO is to, it's a little bit more freedom-seeking, community-based organizations, right? So that's kind of why you see more so if there's a DAO, the code is open. That's not always the case, right? Open meaning that you can view it, and in the case of Sarcophagus, free and open source, right? It is, you can take this software, you can do whatever you want. If you were here in the first talk, we mentioned that what is Sarcophagus known for? It's the software. It's open. You can take it, you can modify it, and it's no problem, right? That comes back to the unlicensed license for the software. And in this case, for the DAO, everything's out in the open. Now, going back to Jonny, something you mentioned, right? And it's a question I have for you, right? We've said this before. No one person owns the project. When it comes to governance, right, and the token treasury having 80% of the power, why do you think, and in the case of Sarcophagus, you can answer this, what is the point of having a DAO as opposed to a group of people in charge of it, right? What is so important about having a DAO, especially in the case of Sarcophagus?
I think the main driving point, like the biggest difference between those two, is trust. Sarcophagus was established, its whole idea was to create a trustless system for something that you normally need a lot of trust for, like pass down data, stuff like that. So the idea of creating a trustless governance system, it just fit. Trying to, and of course, like something like a Genosis vault or a multi-sig would have worked for design. Of course, it would have worked, but it just wouldn't have fit the ideals properly. It wouldn't have been driving that point home of they're creating a trustless product that anyone can have input on, and everyone gets a say on whether that input is legitimate or not. So I think that kind of nutshell answers it, is just that factor of creating a trustless environment where people don't have to trust what this is because it's not necessary. So.
Yeah, and that's perfect. That was my thought too, right? Sarcophagus. If you have important documents, important information that's encrypted, right? Why would you want to have an entity in charge of that information? Someone who is controlling, let's say, the code. They can flip a switch. The code that you thought it was no longer does, and they can now see your information. They can decrypt because they're able to, for whatever reason, have something malicious in their code that you didn't know about, right? That is possible. That's possible even with DAOs. However, it is less likely to occur because those decisions are not supposed to be made without the consent of the DAO, without the approval of the DAO, right? If you just have a company and I'm the CEO of the company, yeah, there's a board, but if boards can have meetings that you're not aware about, right? Or they can have this mention a meeting, and by the time they make their decision, it's already too late for you. The code is closed off, and now you have a problem. Your information is your encrypted information. Yeah, they may not be able to access it if they don't have your private keys, but if this is something you're depending on for your life, that could be a big problem, right? So outside of that, right? Why a DAO? What else has Sarcophagus done? Why do decisions go from the DAO? What makes sense for the DAO do? So there's something Jonny mentioned: liquidity farming and staking. Right? What's the point of having liquidity farming or staking? So the point of that is, right? If you invest, some say invest. If you stake your money, right, you are showing that you have some faith in this token, right? In Sarcophagus. You believe in the utility of it. You believe in the use case of it. However it is acting, you believe in it enough to put your tokens on the line, your ETH or your stable coins or your Sarcophagus on the line because you believe that there is something beneficial about this. What do you think? Whether you're doing it to get more tokens or and you think that's going to be some money to you, or you actually believe in it, it's regardless. You have enough faith to put your money on the line for this. So that's the start of, okay, now we have some liquidity, some open liquidity out there on the market. However, right, does that always make sense to continue to do that? That's a decision for the DAO, right? Should you just release all the tokens through staking? Me personally, I don't think that makes sense. However, it's not my decision. That's the good thing about it, right? I will never be able to make a decision based off of me. It never will be based off me or one singular person. It will be based off a group of people, which is a good thing, where you see now liquidity farming and the staking has ended. Will we see them again? If someone puts up a proposal and it gets voted, we could see it. But from what we've seen the information is not necessarily through liquidity and farming. We're seeing it, hey, there's going to be some type of governance incentive, which I think makes more sense in that you will you voting, you taking part of the network, it has a bigger impact than you just saying, let me just put tokens in here just to get more Sarco, right? Just because you're accumulating, what is the benefit for a utility token for you to what is the benefit to a utility token if you just fill your bags, right? If you're just holding on to it, what is the benefit? It's a utility token. It needs to be used, right? The whole point is to have some type of interaction with it for users to actually use a dead man switch. If you just are getting tokens so you can sell them, that's not a benefit to it, right? The point is to get people to use it and to participate in votes And when votes get approved or they're, for the network, that's going to benefit the network, and it's going to put the network in a better situation to get used more. Vesting contracts, Jonny, you have a better insight on this. So can you kind of talk about the vesting contracts? So the two that passed, they went through the DAO. Can you talk about those?
Are you talking about the funding rounds?
Yes.
Gotcha. Yeah, the funding rounds. So basically, like, the DAO was created. It was given 80% of the Sarcophagus supply. There were builders who had some tokens to help with voting. There was ambassadors. There was a community established. So there was a voting pool, and, people invested in the LP, and there was a bit of an economy. But there was one main goal, and that was to advance the Dead Man Switch to be, the most robust possible version that it could be. And we went through and did testing and figured out that, hey, there are some improvements here that could be made. So let's do it. Let's build it. And so with that, with building, there is a cost, of course, but with it being a DAO, Sarcophagus, I guess you could say, kind of pioneered this, because I haven't heard of it happening basically anywhere else. But in kind of a lengthy process, the original builders got together and were like, hey, let's do this in the essence of a DAO instead of having some, stupid ICO round or, a private sale. Let's have VCs come in, and as a minimum test of their viability as community members, let's have them interact with the DAO itself. So if they want to do this, and I quote OTC, it's not necessarily an OTC deal, but they are dealing with a DAO and they're not on the open market, so it sort of is. And if they want to, get tokens out of this allotted pool, the first round was, I'm trying to remember, it was 10 million tokens at 0.2 per token. And for the investors to be, these VC groups to be able to invest or to be able to be a part of it, they had to actually be a part of this proposal process and go through it and interact with these vesting contracts. And the way it was set up was that the DAO, for like both security and longevity, put those tokens, the 10 million tokens, put them into this vesting contract to be released to the VCs over the course of 2 years in an even release pattern. So, like, at the beginning, there's the whole amount of them there, and at the end, they have even released over time. So what happened was the investors, to get their tokens, they had to put in their share of the USDC that they committed, and then they get a proportional share returned to them of the Sarco in that vesting contract. So, and that happened twice. They did 2 rounds. The first round was 10 million at 0.2, and the second round was 10 million Sarco at 0.4. And both rounds put together came to, I believe it was 5.4 million USDC that was ended up deposited into the DAO. But it set a really big precedent, not only for just Sarcophagus, but for DAOs in general, that, hey, you can ask more from these companies that are coming in and wanting to put their money into something. You can ask them to be a part of your community legitimately. Like, hey, we're a real community, a real DAO. We don't just want your money. We want you to actually be a part of the DAO. That's the whole purpose of it. That's what it was built for. So they were able to establish that baseline and run with it, and it turned out beautifully. It really did some big things. Now, Sarcophagus, in a decentralized manner, has funding to continue operation to build the robust Dead Man Switch that has been the whole point of it. And we have a community built around it. And yeah, it turned into a really awesome deal, because everybody, now we have also these investors that are also putting their time on the backside. Like, we have Greenfield One. They talk to us regularly, so it really turned into an all-around better thing than just the normal ICO or IDO situation. So
yeah, and that's a big deal. That's really what the thought is, right? Normally, right, you would think, oh, we'll just sell No one knows. You just sell your tokens to a VC. That's not right. What's the point of having a DAO if you're going to sell behind the scenes? You shouldn't be able to, right? You really shouldn't be able to if you're taking tokens from the treasury to say, hey, yeah, we're just going to give it. You can't just give it to them, right? That needs to be out in front. The next two topics, right? Centralized exchanges and L2s, right? We had a conversation. We've had conversations about this constantly. People coming in the chat, and I won't labor on these points too long. Centralized exchanges. So many people ask for centralized exchange, but a centralized exchange needs to be funded to be able to allow people to trade, right? So the people that come in, they ask for that. They never put up a proposal. If you never put up a proposal, we'll never fund the centralized exchange. Right? That's never going to happen. And we get to so that's something that people need to be aware about. People bring it up, and they disappear and never bring it up, never talk about it again. So if you're that invested in the network, in the token, in the utility of it, you should have that thought to, okay, I'll make a proposal and I will put it out there, and this is why, and this is how much, and take all the steps. But that has never happened. So in the case of centralized exchange, if that doesn't happen, the network's not going to just do it itself, right? It's just not going to happen. Layer twos.
That actually.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that leads a lot into just the natural leadership selection of a DAO too, as well. Like you're talking about people, it's an open door. Like you can come and put a proposal up and it can get voted on. Now, of course, you don't want to just go straight to the DAO without telling anyone. Chances are nobody will even know that your vote exists, because you do have to have some form of like telling the community, hey, by the way, there's a vote right here. And that was part of the subDAO anyway. But yeah, the natural leader selection process, like a lot of the leaders I've noticed within the community that have been chosen, people that people look to are ones that have been the most active in working with the DAO itself, like the actual organization, with the developers, with everything like that. So yeah, I was just adding to your point there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And we're going to talk about these other dev proposals and community proposals in a moment. Last thing is just and subDAOs, but before we get there, layer twos, we actually, before even getting to putting this on the DAO, layer twos, we brought up bounties that people paid out of their own I would say pocket, right? People made the decision to say, let's get layer twos added. Let's get layer twos added. Have this layer two like Poly or BSC or whatever layer two you wanted. Let's have them, and when people create them, then at some point they're going to be incorporated into the network, right? That's something that the community said we wanted it, and not through the DAO, but through a subDAO that was able to occur, right? And that's something we're going to talk about later. And then we have obviously dev proposals and community proposals. But the first thing we're going to talk about now is community proposals. And one of them was actually Jonny. Jonny was actually one of the first big community proposals. And he can kind of get started on that, even with the incorporation of the DAO Academy. So Jonny started with he was in Sarcophagus. He was helping to manage the community, and then thought was, well, he does a lot. So can we do something that is it's a little bit more than just, okay, yeah, Jonny, you're just here. Thank you for your service, right? Well, just so happened that Jonny came up with a proposal. He had the DAO Academy. He proposed the steps that he was going to do. He wrote it out, and we'll go through kind of how this happened, but these discussions, how a proposal occurs, right? We'll get into that. And Jonny, I want to have you talk about DAO Academy and how that came to be. But before we get there, I just want to kind of go through the steps, right? First, a discussion has happened. It can be a technical discussion. It can be about the future of Sarcophagus. It can be just a general discussion. What's going on, right? You should have that discussion in the chats, whether it's Telegram, whether it is Discord, right? If you just put a proposal, like Jonny said, no one's gonna know it's even there. You have to say something. You have to get traction. If you don't know people are behind your idea, you're never gonna get the votes, right? Once you have that discussion, this is just a logical path, right? You don't have to follow this. You can do whatever you want. Anyone can do whatever they want. But just know, there's a fee associated with proposing it. But these general discussions happen across social medias, right? And once you have a discussion and you think that people are for it, you can propose it, and it hits a vote, right? And it gets that vote is either to reject it or enact it. And one of the there have been ambassadors, right? The ambassador program was one of the ideas. The bounties were another idea that was done through the community. Um, but one of the big ones, right, was this one with Liv. Liv does all the artwork, or is kind of behind the scenes to do the art. She doesn't do all the artwork, but um, her designs are what is Sarcophagus, what you're seeing, the black and the white, the in the corner of the screen, the pharaoh, that was made by her, but she helps with art. If people are making art, she'll help with that. And then another big one besides Liv was actually, I guess, technically the first one, since she's the one who designed the what's going around the actual what you're seeing. There's DAO Academy, and Jonny was first in the community, and he made a proposal, and that was something that's a big deal. So Jonny, if you want to talk a little bit how you got to the point of where you discussed it enough to get a proposal, just go through kind of the steps you did to get there, the discussion, the proposal. What made you think that it was a good idea to propose this at that point, at the time you did it?
Yeah, definitely. And trying to keep it short, I have to get a little bit in my history with Sarco. I started in Sarcophagus in 2021, and it was April or March. And I've been with them, a year now. And when I first started the community, they were getting ready to launch the tomb. They had the testnet version. Everything was real, just beginning stages. And the whole point was like, hey, let's start a community. And from there, it just kind of grew and grew. And the first big whoa moment for me was the ambassadors, actually, because I was researching other groups like Polkadot even. I was a part of that community and just kind of noticed, a lot of things like, oh, they have ambassador programs, oh, they have these bounties, and just kind of paying attention to what other communities did and looking for stuff that fit with the DAO mentality that we wanted. And the ambassador program, I started them because I was like, the DAO needs a way to basically connect directly with the community, have community chosen leaders that can help execute things and keep things operating, because the builders are busy building and I'm one man, so I need people, and so I started the ambassadors, and that just kept growing and growing. And I remember after being within the Sarco community for, I don't know, I think it was 7 or 8 months, I started to realize that it was just, I was spending more time in the Sarcophagus community than I was at my 48-hour-a-week job at Intel as an engineer. And I was like, okay, so I think it's time to make a shift here. I need to rearrange myself a bit. So I started talking to Zach and some of the ambassadors, and I was just like, hey, maybe I should make my own thing over here, really start expanding this idea of community building, and maybe even give some leverage to the community, be like an extra extension, if you will, that, that you can do things through, like advertising or basically anything you want. I just wanted to do something that kind of put some structure behind what I had been doing for the whole year, basically. And so I came up with DAO Academy, at least for the name, and started building a little structure out to it, gave it some form, created a proposal with an idea and a mission statement, if you will, like a charter. And then I brought that to everyone and was like, hey, does this look like something that could be agreed to? And, of course, it was back and forth for a while. There was a lot of little changes that had to be made, updates, things to make it, fit the ideals perfectly. And after probably a couple weeks of back and forth and discussion and figuring things out, it was settled, and then it was put up on the DAO for vote. And then actually that was what ended up triggering the subpay DAO too, was just this it's kind of a chain reaction with DAOs. Like, you have one thing built, and then it causes an idea for another, and that blows up, and then that causes an idea for another, and things just kind of continue to grow exponentially. So, but I mean, that's kind of a nutshell of how DAO Academy came about, was just trying to put what we'd been doing into its own form, if you will. And hopefully eventually DAO Academy will be a DAO of its own, but that's, future.
So you heard the story, right? That it is, a story of how a proposal came to be, right? It didn't just appear out of nowhere. It wasn't just thrown up. It was almost a year before that enacted. Maybe, in the beginning, it wasn't even thought to even try to attempt this. It wasn't even an idea that you even thought about. But over the span of a year, that idea of, oh, I want to help the community, turned into, oh, I can do more than this. I can focus on this full time. I can work on more than just oh, I'm just in the community. I want to make the network better. I want to make the community easier to work with. I want to interconnect the network in a much better way, right? And that is also something that Liv's not here, but that is also something that Liv does. Liv was doing the or still is doing art for the network, right? For the project. But she also has a proposal, right? And something we're going to get into in a little bit are these subDAOs. How do these subDAOs exist, and what's the point of that? But just something to note, right? The proposals, right? There's a DAO Academy to work with DAO Academy. There's the proposal to work with Liv. There are proposals for bounties, right? Now, when working with a DAO, right, there are some pros and cons to it. And again, we're going to get into that when we get to subDAOs, why we do things certain ways to make it more efficient in certain areas. But before we get there, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, and Liv, I think she had a very similar story because I know I mean, I don't want to speak for her directly, but just from an observer's point of view, she started, doing a lot of work. I know she worked on, art and stuff before Sarcophagus, but she was working with Sarcophagus as basically an original builder. And then now she's, like in that time, in the year and a half it's been, she's like expanded and create kind of her own brand out of it. And I know she works with another DAO as well too. So I mean, she's just something about this ecosystem. If you keep working into it and working with it, you just kind of can't help but grow.
Exactly. So you saw that the community is the biggest part, right? If there is no community, there is no DAO, right? If people don't make votes, that's the network's just going to go however a singular person wants. And again, if there's one person doing it, what's the reason for a DAO, right? So another big piece, right? You have the community, right? But what brings the community here, right? It's the network. It's how the actual project works, right? If you just had a dead man switch and said, oh, all you have to do is press a button, no one would really care, right? So something that's a big deal was the how the network development works. And that's where we get into the next slide, right? So we're talking about network development. Again, it goes through the same process. There's network participants, there's builders, there's developers, right? Builders meaning, people who are like programmers, right? And there are builders meaning the people who are with the actual project. But overall, they're still all network participants, right? A builder, a developer, a user, and archaeologist, embalmer. They're all network participants, right? Really, they're all subsections of it. But how does a network develop, right? First, this software, this DApp was created, right? Decentralized application was created, right? At that point, once it's out there, what do you do next? If there's a version upgrade, right? How does that come out? If there's a layer 2 upgrade, right? We talked about layer 2s earlier. How does that get incorporated? If you're refactoring code, how does that get incorporated, right? What actually goes on? And in the case of V1 to V2, right, or getting an L2 or upgrading in general, right? Decent Labs has had a part in that, right? It has been proposed, and they were the ones who actually were the proposal was approved for V2, right? We don't go to V2 unless the community agrees to go to V2, right? The ideas have to be good enough. I could, after V2 is done, I could go in and make a proposal saying, let's go to V3, and every time you lock in your information, I get all the Sarco in the treasury, right? That doesn't make sense. Why would you ever vote to agree with that?
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Why would you ever vote to agree with that? But that's possible, right? So it's important that if the network's going to develop, that goes out there. So one thing that's important, and that's coming down, it's been talked about many times, right? And it's this last piece of the proposals, right? Versions, we know they're going to versions, L2 code refactoring. Typically, that goes through the DAO. I haven't seen it not. I've seen things where people have tested refactoring, but they don't get implemented unless they've been approved. The biggest piece, right, are these Sarcophagus improvement proposals, right? Similar to how like a Bitcoin has it. Bitcoin has Bitcoin improvement proposals, right? They're called SIPs. So what is the process to do that, right? Instead of saying let's do a version upgrade or let's just refactor some code, something that would make Sarcophagus better, right? Right now, it's in V2, it's going to be a 3 of 5. Maybe someone says, well, really, it should be a 7 of 9 or a different number. Or maybe it should just be changeable based on the user, right? That might be an improvement proposal. You can't just say, it should be this, right? I mean, you could, but typically the improvement proposals, right, the SIPs have some type of backing behind them, right? But how do we do that? Does it go to the DAO every time? That's a question that needs to be answered kind of by the community. The thought is there will be some type of structure for this, where that when it comes to this, right, it won't be as hard to complete as we're thinking, right? We're going to make it, the structure should be easy enough that people can actually go in and set this up where it'll move forward in an easier fashion, in some type of standardized fashion, right? So, right, there's going to be some type of design document to introduce these features, right? So the network development, again, it goes through, it's the same thing, right? It goes through all proposals. But the one thing that with the DAOs that is very important, right? Network development, any type of development, is right how efficient it is, right? Eric, when using the actual DAO, right, when voting, it's expensive, right? ETH is expensive, so that's when it comes to subDAOs, right? We've mentioned it time and time again. A subDAO is a DAO that's put into position based off, like, the DAO makes the decision to put that in place for something like the ambassadors, and we'll actually get to that now. What's the point of a subDAO? Something like this, right? You can see on the side, on the right side, and you can see the attributes, right? The DAO controls the overarching opinions, right? You can see they control decisions. Anyone can be a part of the subDAO. It's expensive though, right? We said when you put it on the DAO, when you make these votes, the proposals, it's a couple $100 to make the proposals because they're a little bit more complex. Because that, it makes it a little bit slow. You can't just click it, push it through, and say it's done, right? There's nothing you can do, right? That's a pro and a con. It's slow, so people have time to vote, but because it's slow, you may not be able to get. If 100% of people agree on something, why should it take 5 days to go through? If every single person agreed with it. Now, is that likely? No. That's an extreme case. So a subDAO, right? The subDAO gets its power from the DAO. It's fast. It can be executed in a shorter time. It's much less expensive than an actual DAO, and you can set up subsets of people that are in charge of it, right? So in the case of, I'm going to actually skip the payroll DAO for now, the ambassador subDAO, right? The ambassador subDAOs, anyone who's an ambassador actually becomes a part of the subDAO. The subDAO decides how to actually, so the ambassador subDAO has been taking control of the bounties, any articles that come out, any art, any videos that come out, the ambassadors are actually taking care of funding that, right? If there's a video that needs to get made, the ambassadors are actually funding that, right? It was given a small treasury as well, and those votes are public. You can see those votes on Sarcophagus. Every single one of those votes, whether to add an ambassador, whether to vote for a video, to fund a video, whether to pay other users who just came in and did something that provides a benefit to the network, right? That subDAO was made so that it doesn't have to go on the DAO and cost $200 to push through paying for a bounty, right? Instead, put it on the ambassador subDAO, use a snapshot, use a Gnosis, and get that passed through. Yes, there is a fee to actually enact it, but it's significantly smaller than a DAO. It's significantly cheaper, right? Then we have the liquidity subDAO, right? That's to be determined. And then the builder subDAO, right? That's something that's also to be determined, right? Then something that is ongoing that we see constantly is the payroll DAO, right? And something that Jonny mentioned before. He can talk more about this. He has more. He definitely has more interaction with it, right? You could put a proposal up for DAO Academy or for Live every single month, and it would be very expensive just to execute the plan that gets through. Or you can have a payroll DAO that, if something like DAO Academy or Live has been accepted to have their plan in the past, they would be in the payroll DAO and decide if their plan their proposal gets renewed. So Jonny, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and like we said earlier, the subDAOs get their initial like power within the community from the community itself. So like the DAO says, hey, we need to make this little process over here more efficient. We're going to push this small portion of liquidity to this subDAO, and these leadership over here will be the ones who execute that. Is everyone okay with that? Let's vote. So that's like, initially how it strikes off. And with the Sarcophagus subDAO, as I mentioned with DAO Academy, was kind of one of the striking ideas for that, because we needed to come up with a way to do regular monthly payments to contributors, builders, anyone who's contributing to the actual like building of the community DAO, without having to strike a monthly vote for it, because as we mentioned, that's kind of expensive to just every month expect people to pay a gas fee to approve something that they've already approved for months, months on end. So this was a way to, make that process a lot smoother for everyone and still get that overarching approval of the DAO. So it was struck up, and it's being governed in a unique way, because to maintain that the individuals who are a part of that subDAO are the only ones that can actually control it. So to make sure that there's no outside interference, they created a new, like a voting right token. It has no value, it's not tradable, and it has a decimal of 1. So you can only have one whole token at a time. You can't have fractions of one. And what they did was they gave these leadership who have those voting rights each 1 token, so everyone has an exact equal same vote, made them non-transferable, and gave them to the DAO, so that the DAO has the power to control who gets those tokens or not. And this idea actually has sprouted up some further ideas for actually another DAO, Decent DAO. They're forming their own now, going from Decent Labs to Decent DAO. And they want to take that concept and form it into an 1151, an ERC 1151 instead of an ERC 20. But anyway, so that was the basis of how it was set up to ensure that it was secure. So only the chosen people from the DAO were able to actually put in yes or no votes on that subDAO. And then the remaining voting rights were given to the DAO to be distributed to new members as needed. I believe that the original signers for the subPay DAO are all of the builders, community leaders, and the invested interests like Greenfield One, and et cetera, everyone who was a part of the funding round. So basically anyone who has any vested interest in those funds is a part of that signing, and that was approved by the DAO. So yeah, that basically goes over just kind of how it works and kind of what the purpose was there. Like I said, it's efficiency and trying not to like gouge the members as much as possible with a vote every month, because it does execute multiple every month now, and even able to make the process even more efficient. There's this new tool called Utopia from Utopia Labs. And it works with Genosis as an interface where you can make it kind of like a billing mechanism, where someone puts in their proposal to it and puts in, how much the proposal's for, the basic details, attaches the proposal, and then submits it. And then it automatically generates the transaction on the vault, and then the signers can sign it. And this process, where it really makes it easy, is it gives it an interface that's simpler, and it also allows you to do like auto payments and all sorts of things. So this, like through the subDAO process, you basically can create a decentralized payroll mechanism like fully now, which is really cool, because you can approve it up top, and then everything works its way down into the mechanism, and then it works, as far as gas costs and everything goes, it's probably cheaper to do it this way than today's normal corporate structures, which is the freaking amazing thing of it all. Like once you get it all worked out, everyone agrees, everything works. It's very smooth, and it works. It really works. Like everybody gets stuff on time, everything keeps moving, and everything just keeps turning. All the wheels keep turning, and it's a really great process.
Okay, so in general, are there any general questions about this talk? Right, we talked about the DAO, right? We use Aragon's the one you used, right? All those proposals, they're on chain. You can see them. They're open to the public, right? There's something we touched on lightly, it was voting rights, right? For every token you have one Sarco VR, right? Once you lock that in, you get one vote per token you have, right? As long as you lock it in to get that, right? And that's something that's going to be talked about later. The incentive for governance, it's been mentioned, not often, but enough to know that that is something that seems like people are going to propose. Someone's going to propose it. But I think it's important to kind of know how your vote would count. If you have a token, you would turn it into you would stake it in the on Sarcophagus, and you would actually get a vote. It's 1-to-1. So that's something that would go on. And then after that, right? That's one piece to incorporate how you're going to work with the DAO, right? Then we went into the proposals. What's the kind of life cycle of proposal? Talk about it. It may not be immediate. It may be months. I've seen proposals not with Sarcophagus, but in general, proposals take years to enact, right? Especially a improvement proposal, right? So discuss it when you feel like you have enough people behind it. Propose it. That's when it'll be enacted or rejected, right? That's when you know you can at least put it up and it'll get votes, right? Same thing goes for network development. Not going to go to V2 if there's no reason to go to V2. Not going to go to L2s or do versions upgrade or refactor or do any type of improvements unless there's a reason. If you have a reason, you can discuss it and it'll go through. So Decent Labs, which is now Decent DAO, they're working on V2. That's expected to finish by the end of the year. But again, they went through the same process that everyone else did. You discuss what you want to do, propose it, and if enough people are in agreement, it's going to get passed. Then to work on the inefficiencies of a DAO, that's where subDAOs pop up, right? There's a payroll subDAO which works on managing any type of basic administrative computation for proposals, right? If you're a reoccurring proposal, something like DAO Academy or something like how Liv does the art, that is recurring. Then there's the ambassador program. If you are someone who is around a little bit more, puts a little bit more time in, creates more content for Sarcophagus, there's a chance that you become an ambassador. And then if you are an ambassador, you have a chance to say what gets funded. If someone comes up and they have an idea, they will be funded. Or if they have an idea, they'll get XP. That's one way. Or if there is a bounty out there, it will pay for it. If there's art that comes in, it will be paid for. If there's articles that come in, they can be paid for, right? That's something important that going through a DAO wouldn't make as much sense. You'd be paying more in fees than you are actually paying out a bounty. So it makes more sense to go to a subDAO, which reduces the cost. It's faster, and you can actually get Sarco tokens to people in a much faster way. Then you had the liquidity subDAO and the builder subDAO. The liquidity subDAO is just being talked about just recently. That information has started to pop up in the Telegram and the Discord, talking about what an idea to use the USDC and create liquidity for Sarcophagus, right? More details will come out, but it's going to be something where you need a certain amount of total. So if there's 7 people, you'll need 5 of 7 to actually, get a vote to pass. Again, more information is coming out for that, but that's something that is coming. And then there's also the mention of a builder subDAO, right? Working on what can go with this builder subDAO is like a developer's subDAO, or the original builders of the Sarcophagus, right? This hasn't been set up as well, but some talks have been an SDK, right? A software developers kit, right? That's something that could benefit Sarcophagus drastically, right? Someone will have the tools to tap into the Sarcophagus network. They don't need to use the Sarcophagus website. They can create their own website and then tap into the network. That's something that may make sense. And then at that point, maybe it makes sense to have a builder subDAO where they continue to work on specific products like that, or newer products that would benefit the network. So that was, summary. Are there any questions? You can also, if you don't want to talk, you can type in A in the chat, and we can look to answer those
Someone,
questions.
someone typed in a question just a minute ago, and I just caught it. How many users are part of the voting body today in subDAO? And I just kind of touched on that earlier. There's currently two fully launched subDAOs. There's the original one, that's the ambassadors. And hold on, I can tell you exactly how many voters are on that real quick. Rolls. And there are 11. Nope, sorry, not 11, because we have that person too. So there are 9 signers on it currently, I believe. Yeah, because let's see, oh yeah, and then we're gonna lose one here today. So actually 8. There's 8 signers on the ambassador subDAO currently, and then I need to go look at the exact list, but the Sarco Pay subDAO, I want to say there's 32 signers. I need to go find the list because there is a list of them. Here, if you want to talk for a second, quick change. I'm going to see if I can find the list of how many
No
signers.
problem. And I'll kind of talk about. I'll go into both those, right? So Jonny mentioned it before. The ambassador subDAO, right? An ambassador is someone who's they're around a little bit more than not a little bit more, but they're around and they do additional. They take additional time to create articles, to create art, to create videos, to do something like this is something that I do, not because I have to, but because I think it's important for the network to grow. It's something that I do. I also, help write articles as well. It's not something that I have to do, but I think Sarcophagus is something that I believe in, that I want to see succeed. So, that is why I take that position to do that. And I was selected as an ambassador. Right? I don't control any tokens. I am one of a group of individuals who do. And it's only what is given to the treasury of the ambassador subDAO, right? I don't control anything directly, and nothing gets moved unless everyone gets moved. And again, that information is public. You can go to the sarcophagus.io, you go under govern, and you will see the ambassador subDAO. People, and we select ambassadors, and once the ambassador's in, they don't necessarily stay in forever. If they aren't able to do something additional, if they aren't able to help out and to jump in, if it doesn't work for them, maybe we've had a couple ambassadors come in, they were good for a couple months, and then life kind of stepped in. And once life stepped in, they weren't around for a month or two, and we said, okay, well, they're not around. It's not fair to other people who are part of this, part of the community, or part of the ambassadors, to have to wait on them to make decisions, so then they can get voted out, right? Once you are in there, right, you are not, like I said, you're not there forever. Those who are there now are people who are constantly in, constantly adding, whether it's, we have DJ Coro who does, he's on a project for the community page where it updates the information for the amount of users. He also was working on the L2s when the L2 bounties when that came out. We have Migs, who's not here today. He tends to write all the articles. He does like some research on some DAOs. He posts that information. You'll see that in the main chat. You'll see that in the also message us on the side. But everything we're trying to push everything into the general chat so people see. We recently just added Essie, who's actually in this call right now. She came in. She came in with a couple banners, and some of that was nice. It worked out for the technical talk. We put it as the actual image for the technical talk. It was pushed out on the Twitters, right? You don't need to be a part. You don't need to be a developer to do this. It's something that's going to benefit the community, and the best thing to benefit the community is to get people's eyes on it in a constructive and beneficial way. And we got a question. Yeah, Jonny answered that in the chat, but an ambassador is voted for if you do something like we said. Essie, she created a couple of images that were very good, right on the mark for Sarcophagus, the ideas behind Sarcophagus, and she responded quickly whenever we had questions, or she would also ask a lot of questions. She was constantly in the chat, so we said, you know what, that makes sense. I know Nsikan, I hope I'm saying that right. I saw you jumped in. You wanted to make a banner. That is exactly what we're looking for. We had someone like Booby jump in and he actually, well, I don't know, she, Ubi, came in and did a set up an archaeologist, not on not on the network, right? Not online, locally, right? That's a big deal, right? That's stuff. Once we see you do that, you're being spotlighted, right? We're talking about it. It's not just we like to. That's something that we're trying to do is put everything out in the general chat because it makes more sense, right? We're gonna look to ask for more people to jump in. Something that we've been asked before for the ambassadors that tell us what to do. We can't tell you what to do, right? You need to come in here and do that yourself. Have that on your own accord to do that. However, if we need help, we will be asking for help, right? If there's something that I need to do, that I'm working on, like let's say this technical talk. If I have a question, I ask the community, does anyone have any ideas what they want to add for this technical talk? Some people jumped up and said, oh, I can help, and then they never responded. And then we had, some people jump in and an image was made for technical talk. So, right, it's on. We will put that in. We will put those questions and the requests out there. If you don't jump on it, then you're not going to be seen as much, right? You're not going to be seen like you want to be, if that's the case. That's kind of my talk on the ambassadors.
Yeah, definitely. The general idea has always been, and that's something we're actually like trying to create, like if you will, a spearhead for. We've always had this open door policy and been building out and just kind of taking people on and being like, hey, if you're willing to put in the work, we're going to notice. And in the general way of things, like over the last year and a half, 2 years, that's worked. But in, I don't know, the last 4 months, markets have changed, sentiments changed, and just there's a lot of things changing about the environment right now. So we've started becoming more pointed with our requests instead of just leaving an open door. Like even for the candidates and stuff, we're like, hey, we need this artwork done. Or technical talks is coming up. We need a poster for it, and Liv will make one. But then, a community member like Nsikan, hopefully saying that right, drops in and makes a really cool handmade one. It's gonna get noticed, and it got put on the actual Sarcophagus Twitter profile. So that stuff's always the stuff we're looking for. Like one of our current ambassadors, DJ Coro, he doesn't talk a whole lot, don't see him around, but he's always doing technical stuff like helping with bots or just doing whatever he can in the background. So stuff like that definitely gets noticed, even if you're not like the loudest person out there. If you're doing something that matters, that's what we're looking at.
So kind of going back, are there any other questions about DAO, right? We went into ambassadors, right? That's something that we can talk about actually in another. If we really want to get into another technical talk, I think that would be good. It wouldn't be as long as something like a subDAO, right? Because subDAO is overarching, but the ambassadors, if we want to have that conversation, we can definitely have, it'd probably be half this time, an ambassador talk, or even have that in have a community meetup and conversation about it. But are there any other questions on DAOs?
Yeah.
Edsy?
Earlier you mentioned quick change. You said something about why would someone want to store a sarcophagus, say something very valuable in a project that runs a DAO system. So it's actually a bit confusing because so far I didn't. Okay, to the best of my knowledge, right? A DAO, I understand DAO can influence the governance and decision making of project and stuff like that. But the question is like, is there a possibility of a DAO affecting the security or safety of the sarcophagus somehow to an extent?
Yeah, I think anytime. Jonny, you can jump in, but in general, I think there's always an ability. It's just a matter of how easy is it for a DAO to do that versus how easy it is for just a regular company to do that. Go ahead, Jonny.
That pretty well covers what I was going to say too. It's like, yeah, DAO can affect the overall operation of the program and affect the people around it because everyone's, a part of that community and affected by the overall DAO decision making. But you just got to look at the contrast, like he said, of if you have a centralized entity, like let's say this was the Binance tomb. I mean, do you really trust CZ with your will and testament? I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad guy or nothing. I just think he's got one thing on his mind. So it comes down to the contrast, not necessarily throwing dirt on systems or anything. It's the whole back to the trustless versus trust factor. You don't have to trust a DAO because it's not required. You know that the DAO's interest is self-serving. The DAO will never do anything to hurt itself. Therefore, it will not do anything to hurt the tomb, because the tomb is like the whole point of it, right? So if you think of it that way, think of like everyone who is voting in a DAO is voting in their own interest. They're voting to make sure that whatever that tomb, whatever the DAO does, doesn't hurt them. It either helps them or at least keeps the status quo. So if you keep that logic in mind with voting, like assuming everyone's logical, right? Then a DAO, in essence, will always be safer because you know that everyone in that community is voting in their own interests versus someone like Binance or some centralized entity voting in its own interest. So that's the contrast there of trust and trustless.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay. Sounds like that's it, right? If there are any questions on the any of the DAO information, please feel free to ask in the general chat. This meeting was recorded, right? This talk was recorded. Jonny is going to actually have
Absolutely.
that put up. So you can always check back and look and see if you have other questions that you didn't get to catch. And other than that, thank you all for joining. We're glad to see you all here. Glad to get your questions. Glad to be able to answer them. Hopefully, we can keep pushing Sarco forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.